just about 15 to 20 minutes, as Joanna had mentioned, just to really dig into your switch from Personify to Actify, just to learn a little bit more about why the switch happened, what was going through your head at the time, how you're currently feeling about Actify, just so that we can gain some insightful information into maybe how we can help other people who are going through the same process, or maybe who can find a little bit more value out of Actify rather than Personify or some other similar solutions. Does that sound good?
Yep, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so I think the first question that I have is just how long was Cornet using Personify?
So technically speaking, we were using the prior version, so we were on Tim's, and now it's been a little bit of time, so I can't tell you the exact version.
Okay.
I'm going to say it was 6.4.2, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
In order to, well, you asked the questions. I don't want to presuppose what information you need. So we were on Tim's. We were evaluating whether to go, upgrade to Personify or move to a different platform. And it was such a big jump. We did a full-scale review of available AMSs and landed on Actify. And again, I can give you more or less or whatever you need.
Yeah, so anything that you think would be helpful, please share with me. There's no such thing as too much information. So
okay,
yeah.
Sure. So what has happened is, and this was prior to my time, I've been with Cornet for 10 years, but the Cornet I know was on NOAA. They made a transition from NOAA to Tim's at the time. The exact reasons I don't know. The implementation, however, was a disaster when they moved over to Tim's. So it was really nightmarish when I came on. They already had a consultant come in, and I read about a 20-page report of everything that went wrong. And if you can name it went wrong.
Oh, man.
I spent my first few years in IT reports to me. I'm the chief operating officer. I probably spent my first 2 or 3 years just kind of stabilizing the Tim's platform. And even when it was stabilized, what the vendor said it could do and what it couldn't do were two different things. And that was really what caused us to, let's say, at least fully open up the search. Because, as an example, we were just getting into single sign-on. We were told that, the Tim's single sign-on would allow our members to sign on once and utilize single sign-on for some ancillary best-of-breed products like Higher Logic's type of product. Well, that implementation of single sign-on really worked very poorly. It was kind of another disaster. So that was a nightmare. And every time, even a very minor upgrade from, a version, say 6.1 to 6.2, which should be nothing, was always a catastrophe. When they initially implemented the system, no documentation was kept. So it was almost like any custom configurations, and we had a lot, almost always need to be rewritten. So the system really could not handle our business processes. So we were kind of getting long in the tooth for Tim's. We've been on it for a number of years. Then the recession hit. We were already going to look at either a major upgrade or getting a new system. When the recession hit, we said we've just got to back burner this thing. As we came out of the recession and said we need to start looking around, we said, look, given that this is such a major upgrade, we need to we need to determine if we should upgrade or use another system. We did a full open RFP. Most of the major vendors, as you might expect at the time, IMIS, Aptify, TIMS for Personify, Vectra for Net Forums. There were a few others I can't even remember. IMIS refused to even bid because they said, we don't do open bidding. So fine, you're out. Strangely enough, the TIMS product didn't even make it to the final round because it couldn't handle many of the things we needed. And it was really kind of down to either Vectra's Net Forum or Aptify. And kind of the tipping point for us was the framework that Aptify provided, which would allow you to upgrade and retain any custom configurations, not customizations, in the Aptify world. And we're actually in the middle of our first upgrade now. It's going fairly smoothly as upgrades go. And the biggest thing is all those custom configurations we're done our second round of testing, appear to be working as advertised. So things have worked out well. I think the question you asked, how are we feeling about Aptify? We're feeling pretty good. We've stabilized the platform. It's working as I would anticipate. There have been some issues, and the thing I would do, we have had great support from senior management at Aptify, which is really critical. It was one of our factors in evaluating, not just the technology, but the company itself. Will they be around? Will they be around to provide, will they be around to provide support? And they have been great in terms of supporting us.
Great.
There were some errors made in our implementation, and that was probably on my side in terms of we probably rushed a little bit too much. And so we had a few hiccups as we went live back in 2014. And part of that was still my desire to see this finally go live. And I probably pulled the trigger a little bit too fast. So I would say to future people, make sure you have in your planning horizon that you give yourself adequate time. And the other thing is you can't spend enough on, training your people and getting them acclimated if you're changing from one system to a new system.
Right. Very, very good point. All right. So you actually answered a lot of the questions I was already going to ask you, which is great.
Okay.
So I'm just going to take us a couple steps back. It seems as if the biggest pain you were feeling when you started to search for a new solution was the upgrade process. It was that, and I think maybe number two or maybe equal to that was the fact that the customization that you needed, right? Really what you were using was not up to par with what you needed. So that triggered you to want to find a new solution or upgrade with the current solution that you had, which was not the best plan of action, it sounds like. So when you went to look for all of these different AMS systems, so Aptify, IMIS, MemberClicks, all of those other similar companies, how did you do that search process? Was it all online? Where did you eventually find them?
Sure. The first thing we did is we kind of assembled a cross-functional team, and that was important because I didn't want this to be just an IT project.
Yep.
It had to be a project that we got buy-in from the entire organization. So
do you mind? Oh, I'm
Sure.
sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. Do you mind if I ask who was on that team?
Sure. So I had somebody from every major department that really utilized it. So, in your world, we call them summits. In most associations, they're major conferences. So somebody from conferences, somebody from membership, somebody from learning, certainly IT. I think those were the major, I'm going to say, principal draw. And accounting, and somebody from accounting.
Perfect.
Those were the and the entire IT team. So what they helped to do, because they would use the system, they helped to develop a fairly rigorous requirements document. And so would say for each department, it would in effect line item, membership needs an online join application, an online renewal process, accounting needs to have a way of handling deferred revenue. We have to have X, we need to be able to handle multiple currencies. We need to be able to work in multiple time zones, all those types of things. So they developed a rigorous RFP, a requirements type document that we would use to judge. And once we did that, then they started to do some online research. And I'm going to say I've been around, and at the time I had a director of membership. We've been around the association profession for a while, so it's not hard to say, look, let's hit everybody, in their brother. So it was really easy. We knew who the major vendors were. The only additional one we considered was a potential SharePoint solution, and whether we use I'm going to say, an out-of-the-box Salesforce and configure it to association management quickly, that wasn't feasible. But one of the SharePoint solutions was in the running. So they looked at that, and once they developed a short list of the people, they sent them a fairly detailed RFP document that asked them how they would handle all of our requirements based on the requirements document that had been previously done. That caused, and I think they sent it to 20 people. That probably caused, 14 of the 20 to drop out because they knew they couldn't even come close to handling some of the requirements.
Yep.
So once down to then the 6, they did some demos with the various teams, narrowed it to 2 or 3 folks, and they came down here and did a much more robust presentation with Aptify, eventually winning the bid.
Great. So I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, but were there any specifics that you can recall of why they picked Aptify maybe over the other 2 competitors? Or why you did?
It was, I will tell you in fairness, it was pretty darn close. And I will tell you my recollection, we didn't feel like, especially with the Vectra versus Aptify, it wasn't like it was, oh my God, Aptify. And I want to be fair. I wish I could say it was clearly Aptify. It was, I wouldn't say it was a coin flip, but it was, 51-49. And there was pretty much unanimity among the group that this was the way to go. But as to the specific, what tipped the scale, I don't recall. It's been about 3 to 4 years.
Yep, that's why I said maybe you won't remember. That's totally okay.
Yep.
Okay. So were you the first person who had a conversation with Aptify? You probably weren't the person who spoke to them after the RFP, right?
No, I was not.
Okay.
So my director of IT was really running this.
Okay.
Once, and the cross-functional team kind of got to the point that they were, down to the finalists, then he brought me in just to be one of the voices, and I theoretically could have overruled him, but unless there was something wrong with his rationale, I was going to let him make the decision.
Okay. All right. So once the team chose to work with Aptify, did they make that transition process seamless or comfortable for your team, or was there some bumps in the way? Anything that you thought that they could have done better?
So the reality is there were some bumps in the way, and we're still working with the people who implemented it, the consulting team. They still support us and provide some services. So we have a good relation, and I've told this to them. Part of the difficulty, and whether it would be Aptify or anybody, the problem is, and I'll try to be articulate, I'm not sure how to convey this.
Sure.
We at Cornet don't know what we don't know, meaning we're not sure how to be helpful and ask the questions because our IT folks are just barely getting trained on the system. They don't know enough about it to do that. Your team or the Aptify team knows something about Cornet, but they don't fully understand all our business rules. So oftentimes communications between the two groups weren't great. And that's just the nature of the beast because the Aptify team didn't understand enough about us and we didn't understand enough about Aptify, which led to some, I'm going to say, less than ideal, I'm going to say, things for implementation. So knowing what we know now, if we could do it again, it would be instantaneous and easy because we've been working together. You know, the business analyst pretty much knows our business fairly well. But in the beginning, it was a little bit torturous. And that's just the nature of getting to learn. I mean, Aptify is a critical partner, and it's just takes a long time to get to know. Many of the facets of Cornet were different than many associations. Very complicated because we have, we're global. We run just a hair different. We do things a little bit different. And therefore, we're not kind of like any old association.
Right. So it sounds like something that was very major that they could have done better, in hindsight's 2020, obviously, but is really fixed how well they knew you and vice versa. Do you have anything in mind from where you stand that you think would have been extremely helpful? Would it have maybe been some type of kickoff meeting or some type of audit beforehand or whatever that might be?
Yeah, so we probably should have had a lot more time training your people in our business. More hands-on, have them down here, have them do, in effect, like desk audits of, all right, how are you doing this next? And a lot of why are you doing that? Because we could have driven out a lot of silly behavior. Because sometimes people didn't even know why they were doing stuff. And the thing we should have done, and it's really hard, is having even more training of our people beforehand.
Right.
So, for example, the stock get documentation is just stock documentation. But, what we've done subsequently is take that, put it in a wiki format, and then capture the screenshots that have been customized to our business processes. So if we do, onboarding a member, we now have a process that says, okay, here's the way you do it within Aptify using the custom configurations that we've done, or here's the way registration works. It works great now, but it's hard to do that day one. So we should have, waited and gotten some of that critical documentation done training around that. And again, I'm not trying to point fingers at people. It's really easy, 3 years in hindsight to say, what would you do different?
Of course. And we want you to be honest and candid with your feedback.
Yep.
The more honest, the better, and the more helpful it is for us. So we really appreciate it.
Sure.
All right. I think I just have one more question. You did touch upon it a little bit. I know you said since the switch, you were you're going through your first big upgrade process and things are going okay. They're not perfect, but they're not horrible. So I would just ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling with the switch from Personify to Aptify? 10 being really great and 1 being absolutely horrible.
Yeah, I would say 8.
Okay. And what could make it a 10?
So part of it is where Aptify is moving to, which is good, is where we want to be, right? So we want to be able to, let's say, connect to best of breed solutions. So they're developing the different architecture to make it easier to connect, and I know they want to be, for example, with Apollo, agnostic as to content management website solution. So you can put web objects on a web page, easily integrate data within a website. Absolutely, that would make it, a little bit, actually quite a bit better. Those types of things. That's where they're going. My pet peeve, and I've talked to the folks at Aptify, is they are missing, in my judgment, a part of their product set, which is how you really support chapters. And my understanding is part of the acquisition for community brands will allow them to do that. That will be great when they get it, potentially. But right now, I've had to build out a custom solution for our chapters.
Okay. So they're aware you've had that conversation with them already?
Yes, and they are being responsive. They have been helpful, but that's a hole right now as it stands.
All right. Larry, is there anything else that you think it would be helpful for us to know?
So the biggest thing I would say is, because I've touched on some stuff that's not working right, I don't want to overlook the fact that there's a lot that does work right. The relationship works well. And I can't stress enough, I know the CEO of Higher Logic, so he's been in the association space for any number of years. So if you know this space, you know who Rob is. He was the chief architect for IMAS 15. He's developed any number of systems, and I think he put it best. I'm telling you this because he's the one who said it, and I agree with him. There isn't a bulletproof solution in the association space. Everybody has, a few warts, so to speak. The key for me is knowing that management is going to be there for the long haul to improve the product and to respond to your needs. And in that regard, I would give them a 10.
Awesome. Great to know. That sounds like it's the most important factor in the decision that was made, was really that communication and that feeling of closeness and the feeling of understanding that they have for your company.
Yep. Nobody's going to get it right 100% of the time.
Sure.
But they're going to at least try to make it right when things don't go well.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yep.